Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 5 Door Media Podcast, where we explore the heart of what makes home service organizations thrive. Today, we're talking about company culture. Today's guest brings a powerful perspective from outside of the home service industry, but with wisdom that applies. Mark began his YMCA journey back in 1996 in Joliet, Illinois, as a membership office manager. Since then, he's held nearly every key role you can imagine, from marketing to branch leadership to executive director. For the past 14 years, he's led the Miami County YMCA, where his vision and experience in strategic planning, change management, and staff development has transformed not just his organization, but the entire community. That transformation hit a milestone in 2022 with the opening of a brand new 65,000 square foot YMCA and health clinic, the result of a 9-year, $16.7 million capital project. Mark is recognized as a leader and a coach across the YMCA network. He's a YUSA certified 360 coach, a faculty trainer for leadership and coaching programs, and a mentor in the National Leadership Institutes. On top of that, he brings a creative edge, holding the MFA in creative writing and serving on strategic boards across the country. He lives in North Central Indiana, not far from us, with his wife, 2 cats, 2 grown sons, who, in his words, still wander in and out of their lives. Mark, we are honored to have you on the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. I know you are outside of the home service industry that we do majority, if not all of our work here at 5 Door Media. But, we were talking internally with the staff about this season that we wanted to do on company culture. And Erin, my wife, who co-owner of the agency here at 5 Door Media, she's like, you've got to have Mark on. This is what he does. This is what he knows best. So we're very excited to have you on the show to get, an outside perspective, not just in that home service world, but just in the business world in general on what company culture is and how it impacts organizations across the country.
Sure. Wow, I'm a little humbled by Aaron's recommendation here, but company culture is something that I've been involved with either as a trainer or as a student, or as a practitioner for really all of my Y career. For me, it always comes back to leadership. Culture isn't something you can put in a policy book or engineer. It's something that your employees, your board members, in my case, your customers, it's something that you can feel, but not really describe.
Love that.
So I think it's a hard subject to get your head around, but when you see it, and it's absolutely most impactfully led by the top, by the CEO, the owner, whoever is the one that signs all the paychecks.
Gotcha.
That's where you have the most impact, is when everybody's aligned with what the CEO, the top person, is interested in.
Love that. So let's jump into honestly, just let's start at the root of it. In your experience, how do you define culture inside of an organization, and why does it matter?
Oh boy. Culture's all the unwritten rules, and it shows up at how, I think, for me, it shows up first in how the employees treat each other. So and you can assess this, just go into any random business, whether it's a restaurant, a gas station, a bank, a YMCA, you can look at how the employees treat each other, and especially how the managers treat their staff, and know within 30 seconds or so what kind of company culture exists there, whether it's supportive, whether it's like a family, whether it's a very rural oriented, whether it's strict, all those different things. You can think of it as when you were in school, at high school, and how did it feel to walk into the school? Did you feel welcome? Were you afraid? All of that is an extension of how culture is reinforced and led by the people that everyone follows. And notice I didn't say the people in charge.
Mm.
It's not the people in charge necessarily. Sometimes it is. Hopefully, a lot of times it is. It's the people who are followed, and those are the real leaders of the culture, and those are the ones who kind of affect company morale quicker in either direction than anybody else.
Love
Well,
that. Yeah.
why
It's,
does it?
you know,
Yeah,
something
why
you
did?
said at the top was it's not something you see, but like really what you're describing, it's something you feel when you walk into a place, right? It's not just seeing, you can feel it in the air, the vibe of wherever you're walking into, whether you're a customer or you're new to a company, or maybe you've been at that company for a long time. It's something in the air, right? You can feel it when you walk in.
It's impossible to fake. It saturates every part of the business, and you cannot hide it from your customers. So why does it matter? Well, just put yourself in the customer's shoes. When you go to the grocery store and the checkout person is asking you how your day was and still doing the job, but is seemingly interested in what's going on in your life versus the store that you went to before, where the checkout person is carrying on a conversation about last night with the checkout person in the next lane.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one feels friendly, welcoming, and one feels just like, well, I could have just gone to self checkout and had a conversation with myself. Um, so it affects customer retention tremendously, and I think the effect that I work on in my role is more about staff retention. Because it has the same effect. There's a sign behind my head there. It says, "If you don't feed your staff, they'll eat your members." And
Mm.
that's something I've lived by in the YMCA, and I think it applies to any kind of business where you're interacting with humans. Your staff is the front line, especially, is really where your retention happens. So if you want to hold on to your staff longer, or you want to hold on to your customers longer, um, culture is really the only way to do it, in my opinion. If you're having trouble holding on to your employees, if you're having trouble holding on to your customers, you might want to put a mirror up and say, well, how do we treat each other here? Maybe that's part of the problem.
Love that. So throughout your your career, which you're deep into your career at this point, right? You have a lot of experience in different positions inside of an organization. Was there maybe like one moment that you could remember that helped define and put in your brain the importance of company culture?
Oh boy. There's many. Um, the one that's most recent is the opening of this new facility here. It's not new anymore. It's 3 years old. And um, when we started on this project in 19 not 19 20 2012 ish, we had a lot more detractors than we had believers,
Mm.
and everyone was unified that we talked with, whether they were stakeholders, community leaders, or just the average everyday Miami County resident, that we needed to change. We needed a new facility, and now was the time to do it. But there was a very few people who believed we could raise the kind of money that we needed to do that. So uh, I think our culture at that time was open to, okay, what's next, and we went about it as we really don't know how to do this. We're probably just dumb enough to realize we're not supposed to be able to do this. Um, but nevertheless, that's the goal. So that's what we're going to go for. And over the course of several years, we transformed our board, we transferred our staff. The staff transformation is where company culture really came to play. Um, we wanted to be an organization that welcomed everybody. It's in our mission. It's in the national mission of the Y. It's really the reason I work for the Y. And we weren't terrible at it, but we weren't great at it. But we never really focused on it. And that started with how we treated each other. So when we had to do a restructuring, a reorganization because of financial problems early, Um, that was a tough one because we had staff that had been with us for a long, long time. They had relationships within the community. So how we treated those people, even though they had to leave because their positions were being eliminated or combined and they just weren't the right person to sit on the bus anymore. Could we give them an exit that was respectful, that made sure they got on to the next thing, whatever that was, as much as possible? That was an early sign and signal to the staff here and to our board that the leadership that they had hired um, wanted to make sure people were taken care of. And that extends right down. If you're taking care of our staff, then it results in taking care of your members. Fast forward to 2020, late 2021, we were finishing up this facility. We were told we were going to get about 8 weeks uh, between occupancy and opening. Um, it ended up being more like 4 weeks.
I was gonna say I could see where that was going. Yeah.
Um, we were installing the last of the HVAC units. I think the last one got installed and turned on 2 weeks before the donor reception that we had set.
Wow.
We, back in late 21, when we thought, oh, we've got 8 weeks, we calendared it out again. Okay, so the donor reception is going to be on February 26th, right? And we started planning towards that. We started inviting towards that, and it was pretty tight. We had to decide how to handle staff development and understanding from the experiences of my colleagues around the state who had opened new YMCA's. It's just a tsunami. It's a tsunami of questions. It's a tsunami of people. It's all brand new systems. We were going from a building that was built in the late 50s, the core of it. So all of our HVAC systems were ancient. Our pool systems were ancient, and we were
Mm.
leaping ahead to 2022. Uh, and so there was a technological culture shock that we had to deal with. So many different things coming at us. So we really had to decide: are we going to try to pre-plan everything, write all the policies, figure out what pool temperature should be, how old should you be to be in a hot tub, which direction do you go on the track, all of those things, or because it was definitely an either or kind of thing. Or do we really lift up our people and build in leadership skills, leadership competencies, emotional and social development, all those things that help people deal with change, deal with, I wouldn't say chaos, but uncertainty. And we chose to do that. And that really finished off what was building of the company culture of, regardless of the problem that we're having, we can rely on each other and we'll
Mm.
figure out the solution. We'll figure it out.
I was at an event earlier this week where the topic on moving through friction is such a vital thing for any company organization to do, because like that's where true growth and progress happens, is in those like friction moments. And for home service companies in general, hiring and recruiting, like that is a friction moment, because a lot of like these industries, it is hard work to clean. It is hard work to mow lawns, right? And do these services that our clients do. So it's hard to find those people. And from what I'm hearing, culture is not something that, can only start when that new hire walks into your building for the first time on their first day. From what I'm hearing you're saying is like that culture really starts in that interviewing process, in that recruiting process. Tell me what your experience is, finding the right people in that hiring process, and what role your culture plays in that. Like, what are some things you look for in that hiring process that you are knowing like this person on day one is going to be a cultural fit if they show these green flags in the interviewing process?
Yeah. So especially for our leadership positions, our leadership positions, almost everybody here has some kind of leadership ability. It's first part of our cultures is recognizing that and expecting that. Um, but in our recruiting process for our full-time staff members, we have a score sheet. It's based on job description, and it's got a whole list of things. But at the very bottom, there's a rating that's called AMP, and I got it from Dan Pink out of his book Drive. So it's not mine. I adopted it from him. But the A stands for autonomy. So does this person have they demonstrated through the recruiting process an ability to work on their own, work independently, um, or or can they develop that in the right conditions? So do they have the capacity to work autonomously? The M stands for mastery, and that is, do they have the capacity to master the job that we're asking
Mm.
them, the hiring for them? Not just do it well, but master it. 5 out of 5. Do they have that potential? Do we see that in this process? And then the P stands for purpose. Um, have they shown in their resume, in their other work, in the examples they used in the interview, that they connect to something bigger than themselves? That could
Mm.
show up like volunteering at school. It could show up with church activities. It could show up in a whole bunch of different ways. When we see the letters YMCA on a resume, we gravitate towards that for sure.
Sure.
Um, but which Y was it, and who is the CEO there, and what do we know about it? Um, so with those three things, if what Pink, what not Pinker, Pink, but his idea is that if you have staff who can do those three things or have these three competencies or capacities, then you don't have to motivate them. They motivate themselves. You don't have to push them to improve. They continuously improve on their own if if they sit in the right environment. Um, so and that's the culture is the environment that employees being asked to work in. So when we do
We
this recruiting, those are that's the lens that
yeah.
we look through.
We operate on our agencies and our companies that we operate on something called EOS, which is called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and they have something very similar to what you're describing. It's called the GWC. Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And like those are like the three markers, right? And like you can obviously if they just have one of those three, probably not going to happen. But do they have 2 out of 3? And can some of those be coached, right? Can some of those like be built into them? But that GWC sounds familiar, and I know that's popular in our world, in the home services world, the EOS structure. And you just go down that line, and that really shows you like the common phrase: do we not just have the right people on the bus, but are they in the right seats? Too, because I think somebody could have maybe 1 out of 3 of the GWC for one role, but like if you look at them like in what their strengths are, they might have all 3 for a different role.
Right.
Because so just because they're not maybe right for the one position we're talking about right now, that doesn't mean they're not right for another position. Maybe they're signing up for a technician job, but like really they're the most personal human being in the world. They're motivated by money, and they could be a great salesperson. You know what I mean? Like, so it's going through that GWC. Like, do they get it? Do they get the mission? Do they get what we're trying to do here? Do they know our goals? Do they actually want it? Are they going to be motivated, self-motivated, like you're talking about, to actually do what needs to get done so we can get it? And do they have the capacity? Whether that's hard skills, whether that's soft skills, whether is their personal life too crazy to have actually time to, what's going to take to do what's going to be needed at their job. Like that GWC it sounds familiar for what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's one of the lenses. The other thing that we do is we kind of put them with the rest of the team. So much of company culture is built on how people interact with each other. And as much as if I were a candidate, I would want to look and see what that culture is, um, and to see if I'll fit in. Because it's not just it's not a one-way communication. It's not a one-way decision either. So we want to see them in an informal, more casual setting. So for our full-time staff positions, we schedule a team meal. So we'll go out to breakfast or lunch with whoever can come from the leadership team and the candidate. And we don't ask gotcha questions. It's not meant to trick anybody or anything like that. we're open about the purpose of it, and that's simply so that the candidate gets a look at what it would be like to work at the Y, with these other colleagues that you're going to get to know, and probably work on projects together. And what's the team I'm joining? And you still have a chance to say no. We've had
Mm.
people do that. We've had others that when we got them to that team interview, which is another thing we do, but that team dinner, it can kind of see them interact or not interact. That has a bearing on whether we say yes to that person or not. Um, and it's not perfect by any means, but
Sure.
if we do all this in the beginning in the recruitment process, um, I think we have a better success in keeping people for longer and helping them grow their own talent. Um, you talked about people who maybe come in 1 out of 3 on some of these things. Do they have the capacity to get to all 3,
Mhm.
given the right environment or the right opportunity? Are there other things that they want to be involved with in 3 to 5 years that we can support? Um, Again, that's all descriptive of a culture of a company or an organization, on whether those opportunities even exist. Um, uh, it, and that the more supportive, I think. Well, I know I've experienced this and I've seen it. I don't know if it transfers over to the other industries, but there's a massive competition for talent
Mm.
in our world. And so once we get someone that's really good, it's it's hard to keep them.
Mm.
Um, and we as a nonprofit organization really can't compete with factory level wages, and we really can't. So what can we compete on? Well, that's how do they feel when they're here?
Yeah.
How supported do they feel? How engaged do they feel? How encouraged do they feel? How challenged do they feel? Um, and that wage competition isn't as meaningful when you have a really strong culture.
It's an assumption, but there's a terminology called like hire slow, fire fast, right? And I think that you guys might participate in that. You're talking about like dinners and meals and multiple interview phases, and that's something we, participate as well. And um, a colleague of mine that I was with recently, they do the whole go out to dinner, and they say like specifically we do a like 2-on-2 spousal dinner before like
Mm.
the official decision. And he said, and the reason why is his wife specifically, I think the younger kids call it these days, she's really good at feeling if there's an ick somewhere.
Mhm.
And they say, hey, you're telling me if like there is a troubled home, that's not going to make its way somewhere in the workplace as well, right? Like we bring things with us, right? What's going on in our lives that he literally brings his wife because she's just got that really good EQ of like sniffing out icks. And he said, honestly, it's one of my final things before I offer somebody a job is like getting my wife's opinion on this person and their relationship with their spouse and things like that. But I mean, what you're talking about too goes back to, which might be the theme of this conversation, is it's a vibe, it's a feeling, right? And like, could you, after eating a meal with this team that you're describing, or even like with the owner and their spouse, could you see yourself spending work amount of time with this human being? Because we want to like who we work with, right? There are skills, there are things that matter towards like the business and the job title, but it comes down to like we want to like who we work with, because the crazy stats, sometimes it's depressing. We spend more time with our coworkers than maybe anybody else, especially on smaller teams, right? We
Yeah.
spend more time with them than our family some weeks, right? So we want to make sure we actually like the people that we're working with. And sometimes breaking bread, it's a biblical, ideology of breaking bread with people. It can break down some of those walls to where you really get to know them outside of a like traditional interview process, which even the best of the best, they're going to be on their top game during that interview process. Sometimes you maybe don't get to know the true them, but breaking down that wall and like having a meal with them, really being able to see like, would I want to spend time with this person? Are we gonna butt heads? Do we have different, theories on stuff and our ways we'd like to see things get done? And I think a meal is a great way to find that out.
It's a two-way communication, two-way conversation. Now, it's not practical to do that with all of our staff. We have over
Sure.
100 part-time employees, and I know that my supervisors don't spend that amount of time or resources when they're hiring frontline, but um, they still have a lens towards capability and capacity, and um, honestly, we hire people who value if we hire leaders who value welcoming people and value ethics and value kindness and value responsibility and
Mm.
accountability, then they build their teams accordingly. However, they can figure that out, um, mostly by trial and error,
Yeah.
especially if they're younger and as a supervisor. But it all it's led and modeled by that supervisory core team, and that's where, from my perspective, that's where we spend a lot of extra time and money because the payoff um, for the rest of the organizations is clear.
Yeah.
Our whole business is people. YMCA's, all we do is interact with people all day,
Yep.
and we need them to join. We need them to want to stay. They're all coming here to get a little bit better, and so our role is still in that service mode. How can we help them achieve their goals, whether that's, physical fitness or peace of mind, or just some stability, one stable moment of the day. Um, all of that. Um, they're not going to be here if they don't feel welcomed, they don't feel supported, and that starts with the staff team.
There's a theory as well. You really learn about someone the way that you see they treat like a wait staff at a restaurant too.
Yeah, I've heard
It's,
that
you
too.
can get some really green or yellow or red flags from people depending how they interact with like a wait staff at a restaurant. So there's some benefit there too, right?
Yeah, I've heard of CEOs using that as a model, where they'll look to see, they'll make the person order, they'll put them in a spot where that you can see them interact with the wait staff, and they make
Oh, you can get
there's a
deep into that. Imagine like you're in on it with the restaurant and like you say, hey, I want you to bring them the wrong meal and see how they react. Or like
yeah.
they said no tomatoes, put extra tomatoes on it and just see like how they
See,
respond to that.
yeah, right. I know there's CEOs that do that. I think that's a little bit across the manipulation line, and I don't think it's all that fair or
I get
respectful
it.
to
Yeah.
people. But I
We're like
know
more like
I know what
reality
happened.
TV show, like
Yeah.
scenarios going on.
Um,
But yeah, interesting. Hey, I want to know one maybe common cultural breakdown that you've helped maybe your organization face or maybe helped coach other organizations through, and how was it addressed? What are some common cultural breakdowns that you've seen?
well, communication is the heart of almost all of that. So when you have a blow up on your staff team between staff members, that's usually where you see it, or where the family's not getting along. Um, it, it's because of communication. Something was miscommunicated or misread or communicated differently than intended, or communicated in a really uncharacteristic way. So something was really off character for somebody. Um, and so when we have this situation, we really zero in on what was communicated and when, um, and what was the intention behind that. So words and feelings, tone of voice, all those things come into play for that. Um, I coach people more than organizations, but they both have the same challenges in that they want to jump to the conclusion that somebody was wrong.
Hmm. And they were right.
And inevitably, someone's wrong, someone's right. Even if they're coming into this and they're kind of mediating between two staff members, or two, in my case, two members here that didn't get along in the basketball court or something. Um, And the reality is that that's just not, it's way too simple of a thought. And so if we can back up to, let's find out what really happened. Let's find out what happened before, what was going on before in this person's life, what when they walked into the building, they might have already been emotionally hijacked. Um, I looked for feelings of regret. So when something blows up, we're not really measured on that. We're measured on how we recover that relationship. Um, and when things get heated, people say things they don't mean, or maybe they do mean it,
Mm,
but it's not part of our expectation as a professional or as a leader in the organization. So zero in on that kind of stuff. I ask a lot of open-ended questions. Um, Try to what we call it in leading and coaching others, which is one of the training I do. It's called the a beginner's mind or the curious mind. And what it means is that instead of asking why or what were you thinking or all of those things, you're just asking, tell me about what happened.
mm,
What happened before that? What happened after? Um, Tell me about what and how are the three starters of those questions, and that keeps everything neutral and allows people to let their logic center part of their brain turn on and their emotional center quiet down a little bit. And then we just work through it. I think most of the time people feel regretful about it. That's really what I'm looking for. And
mm,
then the conversation turns to how can we prevent this from happening? How can we prevent this outcome from happening again by recognizing that I didn't get any sleep last night. Maybe today's not for the day for me to be into work, or my kid's in the hospital, or
mm.
I really just feel like I completely screwed up at work and I don't need somebody talking at me. Whatever that is, and recognizing that having that self awareness of your own emotional state, and then we provide a lot of tools, a lot of intentional training about helping staff manage those emotions and manage relationships. We did a ton of that before we opened the new building instead of policy development. And it paid off tremendously. And like I said, there's a tsunami that happens when you open a new facility.
Oh, yeah.
And we hire a lot of young people. Sometimes it's their very first job. So think of the 19-year-old uh, just graduated high school front desk person, and she looks up and there's literally 100 people in line waiting to talk to her, get nervous. So how does she handle that stress and anxiety of trying to get through all these people? Well, if she learns emotion management, it's not even a thing. And we had that time and time and time again, that observation about our staff team, all the way to our most part-time staff, because we intentionally worked on it.
Gotcha. So communication is that biggest thing. And I don't know. I have a phrase in our office that over communication is impossible. I don't think it's
Ah,
possible to over communicate things, especially in like client service world or when you're communicating to a customer. But it can be difficult because I think a lot of times when this is what you were describing, if I'm hearing you right, a lot of times the issue that we think we're communicating over is actually in no way the issue. There isn't always the issue behind the issue, right?
yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to pull out of people to find like what's the root cause of what the actual issue is right now. Like
Yeah.
we go through that EOS structure I was talking about. We have weekly leadership meetings, and the big bulk of that meeting is called the IDS, where we identify the issue, we discuss the issue, and we solve the issue, like all within that. But a lot of times, like halfway through the discussion, I'm like, wait a minute, we're discussing the wrong issue. This is not an issue. This is like the surface on top of the surface level of what we're actually should be talking about. So what are some like practical tips on how to dig deeper and to find that actual issue? I know you said a lot of it is just asking questions, and like asking the right questions and digging deeper. But when emotions are high, which sometimes they are, right? Emotions are high in certain moments. How do you do that and lead through those moments to actually find the issue and then move forward from there?
Well, those open-ended questions help a lot. If emotions are still high, sometimes you just have to let them sit and vent and just get it out. Emotional hijacks have a biology to them. that include adrenaline and these other chemicals that are all part of our lizard brain, that tell us to fight or run. Um, and you, there's no point in discussing anything from a logical sense or solution sense until that hijack is over.
Mm.
And so giving them time, whether it's a breather, whether it's a walk outside, whether it's just some quiet moments in the office, whatever makes sense, um, and not put so much of a pressure of we got to solve this right now. When someone in front of me is obviously not in any position to solve anything. And so give them some grace in coming down off of that, expect and believe that they're going to be regretful from that. And when they get to that point where they're starting to feel the regret, that means that they're starting to think about what happened, and their emotional center is now um, dampened and their logic center is starting to turn on. That's when you really can start having the questions. There's a really easy exercise that we use in problem solving. I don't know how well it works with someone who's just blown up, but it really kind of speaks to what you're talking about. And if you're trying to figure out what the real problem is, you just keep asking why.
Mm.
So this person was really mad at our referee. Okay, why? Well, he said he saw the call differently. So, and well, why? Well, he was sitting and his angle was this. Well, why? If you keep going backwards, eventually you can get to some kind of root cause. It's called five whys because usually it takes 5 times. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's
Mm.
that's the name of it. So that's one of the problem solving things. Um,
Just
I
keep digging, right?
yeah, as long as it's done, again, this is a reflection of culture. To accomplish that, there has to be a level of trust,
Mm.
because if people don't feel like they can trust you, then they're not going to say anything. They're just going to walk
They're
right
walking
off.
into those moments
Right.
saying the wrong headspace.
They
Nothing's gonna get solved.
right. They feel if they're at risk in any way, they're going to stay in protective mode and
Mm.
not be part of the conversation. And so a big part of organizational culture that we want here at the Y anyway is we want people to feel like we trust them and that they can trust us. And from a leadership standpoint, what that looks like um, often is, do we stand up for our staff when they're under siege? So when that referee is getting yelled at by some random parent who doesn't like it,
Mm.
that he called the wrong thing in his view, do I have a program director that's going to step in and get in between that and say, listen, let's go talk in my office. Whether the call was right or wrong, whether the person did something right or wrong, if we're not willing as leaders to be that shield, then that communicates to our staff that they can't trust us when it really matters, when things are when it's crunch time, when things are really tense. We're just as likely to step back as we are to step up and deploy that shield. I think that's
Yeah.
so important, and it's not that you can't fake it. You have to do it in the moment, and your staff will see it or not. Um,
And the ripple effect too, right? When they see that consistently, then your staff is going to start doing that to other members of staff. Maybe the people that report directly to them. It's that ripple effect is when it's beautiful,
mhm,
right? And I think a lot of times, like asking questions instead of saying statements helps that. Somebody's like struggling with something, you ask the simple question like, well, what would happen if you that played out? Let's play that, the idea you have in your head, the worry, the concern you have in your head. Let's play it out. What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And like let them go through that thought process.
yeah.
And then the next time they're prepared, because now they're asking themselves that question before they come to you, when you're just going to ask them that question, right? So then they're
Yeah.
asking themselves that question, and like that's how they can self lead, through moments.
In my world, we call that coaching,
Yeah.
leadership coaching, and it is a pleasure to see a staff person who can come into a supervisor's office and sit down and say, "Just listen." And they ask them this. They ask themselves the right questions, and they coach themselves. and they find the solution, and all the leader has to do is nod.
Yep.
That's when you know you have a coaching culture, a culture of trust, culture of open and continuous improvement, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
It's when your frontline staff or your leadership staff is emulating those skills without any prompting. They just do it.
It's that difference between coaching and consulting, right? Coaching is leading them to make those decisions and grow on their own. Consulting is straight just telling them what to do.
Yeah.
It's that classic teach a man to fish compared to giving a, it's that same type of mindset. Which, talk about like the idea of self-leadership. I think one of the things a lot of business owners struggle with is self-leadership. When you are the top human, there is really no one there to keep you accountable. So we have all these big dreams about what do we want this culture to be? What do we want this company culture to be? But then, and it's really fully on us to set that bar and then keep that bar at the height we want it to be. But at the same time, like, what is a personal habit or a leadership practice that business owners can do that will keep them grounded and aligned with their own values that they're setting for everybody else? Like, how do we keep ourselves at the level that we want everybody else to be at too? What are some ways we can be better at that?
Well, I think getting around colleagues, um, networking, getting outside of your environment, see how other people are doing the work. Um, you either find out that misery loves company, that your unique, terrible challenges aren't so unique. Everyone's dealing with it. Or you find out that someone else is dealt with the same thing last year, and this is how they solved it. Or you find out that someone needs your help, and so then you get put into a helper role, or um, so you're coaching somebody else, and even if that's your direct competitor,
Sure.
um, you know, I think there's value to that, and it reminds you that you're not in this world alone, whether it's your work world or your family life or whatever that looks like. Um, you have to get outside of your own head and understand that there's a lot bigger things than just what you want. Um, it's a tough one at times, but so just taking opportunities to meet with your other colleagues, meeting people that you really want to meet.
Yeah.
Um, I think looking for opportunities to engage with people that maybe aren't like you, but you have something intriguing, they have a value to it. Um, you can do this very passively too. The world that we live in now,
Yeah.
there's zillions of podcasts. I bet you there's one out there that's going to speak to you. But if you,
Maybe the one they're listening to right now.
I don't
Like,
know, maybe,
ironically enough, like what you're describing is taking the time to listen to conversations like this, just to put yourself in rooms. I know in the home service world, like masterminds are a very popular thing where you get into a room full of other home service business owners like you that are at the same level as you, that have the same mindset as you, that have the same issues as you. And one of like the biggest and easiest like leveling up hacks is learning the mistakes that you're probably going to make before you make them, because you're hanging out with people who already have and learned how like they got over it, right? So like
uh,
just being in those rooms can be extremely powerful.
I think that, well, that happens in the YMCA too. We have our conferences and networks
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And if it's hard when people don't participate in that, it's hard for them to get help when they really need it. It's hard for them to ask for help. I don't really understand it. It's never been part of my my makeup as my personality. Um, but I know it happens, and it's a real struggle. And what happens is the organization really struggles, and for no good reason. When solution could be right, one phone call away or one whatever away.
Yeah.
It, uh, I think that if so, if an owner or organizational leader wants their staff to improve, they have to model that too. They have to show that continuous improvement is a thing and that there's more to learn, by sharing some of that, that's what they're doing, by talking about the latest book they read or the, the network person they met or the CEO that they met. Doesn't mean you have to be the community organizer of your community. Um, but we don't really come into this world alone, and we're not meant to be alone. And that goes for work too. And I think, especially at the very top, whether you're an owner, CEO, wherever, if you're the top person, it's a really lonely job. There aren't as many people in your life that truly understand it, including some of your family, unless you happen to co-own, then
Hmm.
they might understand. But it's hard to really find someone that truly understands the weight that you carry when you're at the top. Um,
100% true. Yeah, I
so,
grew up in a business owner home, and that was a constant like conversation I heard from my parents. Like my dad owned the business. My mom was a teacher, so she had another job outside of the business. But there was that constant like, we don't have a lot of friends. Why don't we have a lot of friends? And I remember my dad used to say, is like, honestly, because every time we're with people that aren't owners or like high level leaders, all they do is complain about their jobs. And I'm usually in the background like, yeah, your boss is right. You're actually the one that's wrong. So
yeah.
it's really hard to be like socially around people that don't have like those same daily, struggles and mindsets that you do, because let's be honest, a big part of social life is you get together and complain about things in your life. And sometimes that's your boss. Sometimes that's your job. It's not the healthiest way to handle those problems, but that's what happens. And if someone is a boss in that circle, that's not something they're going to relate to, very well. So your honors are right. It gets to be lonely. And that's a lesson I've learned in recent, in my leadership journey and ownership journey, is take those people along with you. I'm starting to bring some of our staff to conferences that I go to whether it's for like agency conferences or other like industries that we serve. Start bringing those with you, because I'm a visionary brain. So like I could sit in a conference and dream all day, and then I get back and I have like zero follow-up skills to actually put things in place. So like, what good is that doing, right? So I'm starting to bring people with me. We dream while we're there, and then they're the ones that can pick it up when we get back and actually put stuff in motion to get started. But like, it is one thing for a leader of a company to go and to grow and like do self-improvement, self-betterment. But if you're not bringing your staff along with you and they're not growing with you, you're missing out on a lot.
Well, eventually the staff get disengaged, um, and or they never rise up to the expectation that you have. If you expect your staff people to become leaders in their departments, to have those skills, but they never get an opportunity to try it out,
Yeah.
then they're not going to develop that skill set. So that we do the same thing here. When there's a state conference, next year's a huge national conference. So I'm trying to figure out how can I set aside enough
Yeah.
money to send as many people as possible to it. Um, what comes back is, uh, well, what I should say was what's communicated to those staff people is that we believe in them.
Mm.
We believe that they're worth the investment. They know how much it costs to fly to New Orleans and stay in a hotel for 3 days, and I don't have to show them the bill. They know that costs money,
Yeah.
and they know we're a nonprofit organization. And I'm just really frankly, I'm just doing what, was done for me early in my career, and I knew as a positive. I felt humbled that my boss would send me and my wife across the country and pay for everything, to go to some Y conference. And
Yeah.
so that built, loyalty, it built trust, it really built my confidence in that, hey, it really is worth it. The other thing that happens is when you have your staff around you in these networking opportunities, is they find out where they stand in their own skills versus
Mm.
the rest of the industry. They find out that, oh, hopefully, and I've gotten to know for some of your teams, so I bet you this is true. They find out that they're pretty gosh darn good at what they're doing, in comparison. And
Yeah.
so they get a little more swagger in their step, a little more set in their shoulders, and that confidence level goes. We've seen that. I mean, I can think of two of our staff right now who just in the last year have turned from not really timid, but kind of on their heels, kind of listening, watching, into leaning in and really leading. And the
Mm.
only difference is confidence. They didn't see
Confidence
them
is huge.
they didn't see themselves as being
Yeah.
that expert or the professional or whatever that is, or have the ability. It's almost like it is as a form of imposter syndrome. And one way to break them out of that is to sit them down next to somebody who has the same title as they do and complains twice as much, and has
Mm.
all kinds of problems, and they
There's
realize
also
that.
just self-awareness with that too. I mean, whether they realize they're better than someone they probably didn't think they were better, but there's also such powerful things that can happen when you're put into a room of peers and realize that they go through the same things that you go through. I've always said, like, one of the healthiest things for a marriage even is like a really good double date when the other couple also starts complaining about stuff that you thought only was happening in your marriage, right?
Yeah.
Like, there is an unbelievably powerful mental thing that happens when you realize your struggles are not just your struggles. And like that can happen professionally, like that understanding and that realization too. I mean, we're at an agency peer group, and like I've been starting to take some staff to that, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm in a room full of me. I thought I was the only one out there, and like
Yeah.
we see ourselves on an island, but when we realize that island is much bigger than we thought, and maybe it's like actually a 5-star resort full of other people that are like us as well, amazing things can happen from that. That's this form of self-awareness, and then you form connections and you can grow with those people at the same time. One question I want to ask, which is very simple. I got two more things for you. Is a fill in the blank kind of question. I've been asking everybody on this season to fill in the blank. Culture dies when blank. What is something that like will always kill a company culture?
Gossip,
Mm.
especially when the CEO is participating in it. Quickest
You
way to
got some
sell
stories behind that, don't you?
it. Experiences.
Yeah.
I will protect the names of the guilty.
No worries. Yeah.
But it's one of the quickest ways to kill a team, is to allow gossip to be part of your culture, part of your regular everyday thing. Um, and that it's something that I'm a pretty easygoing boss, and I tell my staff knew this from the very moment I was hired, because they ask
Yeah.
what ticks you off. They ask all the good questions. Um, and that's one of very few things that'll send me to level 10 immediately. It's so disrespectful and it's just toxic, and it's a waste of energy. And
Well,
so
you've talked a lot about trust, and like that is just trust is gone
yeah,
when you hear gossip going on about you, or even like somebody else, right? Like
absolutely.
it's gone, because then you always have that in the back of your head, like, what have they said about me? What have they said about somebody else? And when that trust is gone.
It's kind of like when you see the candidate, how they treat the wait staff.
Mm-hmm.
It tells you something about their character, that on how they respond to that. And then I mean, let's face it, people gossip. It happens all the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like we can stamp it out completely, but if it happens in front of other staff, there's a difference between gossiping and venting.
Mm.
Um, if it happens at my front desk in front of members, I mean, that's almost as bad as a lifeguard
Oh
being
yeah.
asleep on duty. I mean, that's
Yep.
almost termination if I come across it. Um, but it's how we respond to that is also something that our staff pick up on, and um, that's a big hot button for me. I'm sure there's lots of other things I could have said, but that one,
No, yeah. Anything that breaks down that trust, right?
yeah,
All right. So the last one I always ask is every episode of this podcast, no matter the season, we always ask a fun, like, would you rather question at
yeah.
the end of the episode. And it's always related to the topic of the season. So this is your would you rather culture edition. Would you rather work with a team that is fully loyal, but not yet high performing, or high performing, like the highest performing you've ever seen, but deeply divided?
Oh, fully loyal. Absolutely. Um, this I've had the other and didn't work out well for me. But loyalty is built on trust and respect in the sense of, hey, he's got my back. I trust where he's going to take us. And I will take that team over anybody else, anybody with whatever the resumes are, um, every day of the week. Because it's not about any one individual's person's ability. It's about how the team works together. And um, if they're willing to trust me and trust each other in that level, then there isn't anything we can't accomplish.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Something like that. My wife hates that, but so I never say
I
it.
mean, it's as cheesy as it can be, but hey, there's
Yeah.
some truth to it too. Hey, well, Mark, thanks again for being on this episode of the Five Door Media Podcast to talk about this mythical topic at times of company culture, and just thank you for sharing your heart for leadership and like people. I really think your perspective is a powerful reminder that company culture is not just industry specific; it's human specific. So even though you're out of this home service world that a lot of our listeners are coming from right now, I think it's a really healthy practice to get outside of your bubble sometimes and see what the perspectives from people in other bubbles are having too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for dropping the nuggets that you did. And for everybody listening at home or watching from home, thank you for watching this episode of the Five Door Media Podcast. This season of culture has been really cool from my seat to sit back and learn from industry professionals and just professionals in general across the world on this topic of culture. And we just really, really believe this is needed for the home service industry. This is really needed for every industry. But I hope you guys have really learned something from Mark today that you can take back to your company quickly and change something and to better that culture moving forward. So, Mark, if people want to learn more about you and the coaching that you do, how would they find you?
Real easy. They can find me at the Miami County YMCA in Peru, Indiana. M Demchak, Demchak at mcymca.org. It's been my pleasure, Drew. I could talk about this for hours and hours. I have uh,
Yeah.
with colleagues. One last thought I'll leave you with. Um, we don't manage people. We manage things. We lead people.
Mm.
And if you, as a company owner or department head, aren't happy with how people are treating each other, you can fix it. Look at yourself first and start there, and it'll shift as quicker than you believe.
That's such a good reminder that if you're an owner listening to this, this is your company. You're in control. You have the power to change things. You know, so good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being here. Like I said, thank you for watching at home or wherever you're listening or watching from. Make sure to tune in for more episodes of the season 3 Five Door Media podcast on the topic of company culture. We'll see you next time.